Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the possibility of, or the likelihood of, a number of Ukrainian refugees coming to the West, and that could be Britain, the United States, Canada, Australia, the usual places where either middle-ranking economies or the dirt poor economies, that they all want to gravitate to the richest countries. They get to see the soap operas on television. They see the life that people lead, and they go, "Holy shit, I want to go to those places." Now, I guess a bit of a backstory, because I'm going to talk about immigration, which groups tend to integrate, better or worse when they come to the West, and but also I've mentioned a little bit about Ukraine. Now, Ukraine, we can be quite sure that given Ukraine was pushing black and brown alleged refugees and mostly economic migrants, if the truth be told, was pushing these people through Ukraine and trying to push them into Poland and Hungary and Romania and trying to put pressure on the EU and so on. That was their shtick there for a while. And they're also being used by NATO and by the United States as like a cat's paw to irritate and annoy Russia. Now, Ukraine, given what a corrupt basket case they are, and how they're more than happy to stuff millions upon millions of dollars in the pockets of, say, the Biden family, and indeed other Western goons and politicians, they're hardly the squeaky clean outfit. And by the way, corruption and all that sort of stuff are in that part of the world. It's just how business is done. That's just it. In fact, you're strange if you don't do it, according to them. So Ukraine was clearly just a plaything for the globalists, and again using it to irritate the Russians. Now it's ended up that Putin ran out of patience and invaded, which is hardly a good thing. But given in the wider sort of circumstances, it's not that surprising, really. The West didn't have to use Ukraine as a device to irritate Russia like that, and that played as much a role in anything as where things are today. Now, coming to the issue of the refugees, now the Russians seem to be reasonably restrained. They're not doing, absolute war of annihilation or anything like that. I think they're more interested in trying to change the administration and settle things down right now, and doing what they need to do to get that done. But that doesn't mean there won't be, potentially a lot of refugees. Now, some of these people in Ukraine are being said, well, hey, come to England. I think Boris Johnson's said that by the hundreds of thousands they can just walk into England any time as refugees, and they'll be looked after at the expense of the British taxpayer. That seems astonishing for a country that's drowning in debt like the UK. I don't know where that money's going to come from, but clearly it's the globalists have told Boris to do it, and he's doing it. But Boris isn't a sovereign leader of a sovereign nation. He's a flunky stooge boy for the globalists, and so he's doing what he's told, as indeed others around the world will be doing as well when they take in the refugees. Now, the intake of migrants, refugees, and so on is a sensitive subject, and politicians know it, so they attempt to hide the numbers through various means. For example, in Australia, if you look at the official percentage numbers out of just almost 26 million people, it's alleged that only 3% are Chinese. Yet also similar figures, or other figures rather, suggest that nearly 3 million. Now, 3 million of 26 million is what, 11 and a half, pushing 12%. And I think even that's an understatement. So they're trying very, very hard, Western governments, to understate the amount of people. In fact, they're saying, this is as of just on 20 months ago, they're trying to say that Australia is 77% white. Now, if I sit in downtown Sydney CBD, if I sit in the downtown CBD and count, out of every 100 people go by, how many people are white, then I struggle to find 40. Now I'm even sort of taking out what people who obviously look like tourists, say a bunch of, I don't know, Chinese tourists running around with all with cameras and looking like there's like a tour guide with them and everything. So you don't count them, but you look at people that look like they live here, they're working here, they're dressed for work, and they're hurrying around getting their lunch quickly because they don't have the time to sit around. Now tourists have time on their hands, but these people don't, and about 40% of the people in downtown Sydney are white. So this idea that they're claiming in these government numbers that 77% are white is just utterly absurd. And you see the same thing in other big cities like Melbourne, for example. Now in Sydney and Melbourne, close to, not far off half the total population of the country live in those two cities. So anyway, the governments are tending to hide the numbers. So the real numbers are at least 12% Chinese, at least absolute minimum, and I think closer to 17 or 18%. The Indian population, they're trying to say is 2%, which again, utter absurdity. It's far closer to 8% in my view, and that's a minimum. The Arabic or Middle Eastern population is supposed to be so low that you can barely count it. That's bullshit. They're about 5% in that, if not a little bit higher, and then various other sort of groups. So my sort of feeling is that certainly based on the numbers that I've sort of extended and done the actuarial sort of number crunching on, that the white population of Australia is probably 62-63% at the moment. And so it's gone from 98%, 99% 25 years ago down to, and that just shows you the scale of the immigration. But having a look at what immigrants succeed or integrate, or maybe integrate's a better word. The trouble with the Chinese community, especially when you bring people in bulk, they come along with all their corrupt, third world bullshit habits when they come in for business. So the Chinese and the Indians, they set up their own little economic sub-communities within the community where their job is to take money from white Australia, but any money they take, they then try and keep within their own genetic community. And so, I mean, this is terrible for innovation and all sorts of things. I mean, it's absolutely deadly. It seems to be good because you get these cheap peasant labour coming in, but the reality is they create these sub-economies. There are Chinese businesses that are only allowed to buy from Chinese suppliers, and there's like a mafia standover sort of crowd that exists there, or they'll give they'll only loan money to certain businesses if they want to loan money to Chinese business, that Chinese business is obligated to pay, firstly, ruinous interest rates, but secondly, can only buy from other Chinese businesses and so on. So it's a very mafia-controlled little empire, and it's bad for the overall economy. There's no competition, there's no innovation, there's no openness. Then they don't hire white people, they don't train their people, they just use them and so on. So it's not a good situation at all. Now, if people are brought over slowly and sprinkled around the country, then they do tend to integrate far more successfully. When they're brought over in the masses that they're currently brought over, same with the people from Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Chinese, Hong Kong folks, they come over here in mass and they just set up all their little mafia, little goon economies in the country. And when they come to the West, and so they don't and they bring, of course, all their corrupt habits and the like. So same as, in India and China and all these sort of places, corruption is a way of life. You just bribe everybody to get things done. You bribe the police, you bribe the judges, you bribe all the government officials, you bribe everybody. You bribe teachers to make sure your kid gets a good grade at school. It's just how they live. And they think we're crazy. They think we're insane because we don't do bribery. But it's so quick, it's so efficient, it's so get things done. But they don't understand the concept of wealth and how wealth's created. They've got no idea. Now, coming to the integration of say, the Chinese, to some extent, they'll integrate. if it's even 10%, I'd be surprised to integrate into the the Anglosphere, if you like, of say Australia or Canada or wherever. The Indians, even less. Indians, maybe 1%, if even that. As I think I've mentioned in other videos, Indians that have emigrated to the West in 1850, so 170 years ago, before the American Civil War. They've emigrated to the West that long ago, and they're still today sending back to the village of their ancestors to get husbands and brides. They will not marry into the Anglo thing, and they're still they're absolutely rabidly determined to keep their people genetically pure in terms of marriage and procreation and so on. So these people, Arabs too, their integration is very low. Not that it doesn't happen, and maybe over many hundreds and tens of hundreds of years it might. But if they haven't integrated after 170 years of living in a country that's 90% plus white, then I don't think they ever will. Maybe in another 100, 200 years time. But it could be a project that's going to take 500 years to get anything resembling integration. Now, it's a little bit different with Russians, Ukrainians, and those sort of people. There's many of them are still sort of Christian, so you've got that. They're white, so you've got that, and they've come from. I mean, you wouldn't call Ukraine and Russia basket case countries in the same way as you would say an African tin pot nation with famines and endless civil wars and that sort of thing. So Ukraine's got some it's quite rich in raw materials, some very good agricultural land, and also some fairly, I wouldn't say huge, but at least quite substantial manufacturing base. So one of the main reasons they're so poor there is because of rampant corruption and just inefficiency and so on. Now, people who come from Russia and Ukraine, they think people in the West are mad. They've got no concept of social trust. They just don't know what it is. You talk to them, you explain it to them, and they just look blankly at you. So they don't understand that. The people from that part of the world have never trusted their government. They rarely trust people even in their own family, let alone outside of the family. Bosses aren't trusted, workers aren't trusted, public servants aren't trusted, police aren't trusted. No one trusts anybody. It's everybody's there to be bought and bribed and corrupted and so on. So you get by as best you can, and if you can outwit other people, and that's the key, because no one trusts anybody. They're all busily trying to outwit each other or bribe each other. They only seem to understand those two things. So when they come to a place like Australia or anywhere in the West, particularly a place like Australia where social trust used to be very high in Australia, so they come to a place like this and they perceive social trust is equivalent to stupidity or naivety or just plain moronic behaviour. If you're not actively working to deceive the person next to you or to bribe them or to lie to them and cheat them, if you're not doing that, then you're the dumb one. Because if you're not cheating them, they must be cheating you. And so that's how people from low trust societies think. That's their attitude. And they can't conceive of what a high trust society is. So Russians and Ukrainians that come to, for example, Australia, they just say, well, Australians are so stupid. They trust the government, they trust each other, they trust their neighbours. That means not that they should trust or there's reasons to trust. It means they're so fucking dumb. And fucking dumb people deserve to be poor and have their asses kicked down the street. So again, you try and explain trust and social trust and why people trust each other. They've got no concept of it. And the fact there's been trust for many, many years, tens. In many ways, there's been more trust, for hundreds of years in the Anglosphere. Britain, Australia, Canada, US, and so on. There's been more trust than the Russians and Ukrainians have ever experienced ever. Across generations, hundreds, 500, 1,000 years. So this is very alien to that, but nonetheless, what I've certainly by my observations, if the children, say somebody, for example, a Ukrainian family comes to to Australia. The children, they've got three, I'm thinking when they're three children who are maybe 19, 20, 13 and 8 or 9 years old. The eldest two married other Ukrainians who'd come here, even though they'd arrived at high school age. The youngest one, who went to primary school for 2 or 3 years, ended up marrying a local person, not someone of Ukrainian heritage, but a local person. I think they were of English extraction. So now all their children, this is years ago, all their children, well, the eldest two have had children, or the eldest one has had children that are now of marriageable age, and the other one's but pretty soon. I think the middle child's child is in maybe first year college or something like that. But the eldest one, the eldest child they've had, has got married and has married a local, some local guy. So really, it's one generation, two at the absolute maximum, and they've integrated into the local sort of Anglosphere, and they are then acquiring the attitudes of social trust that other people have. So that they're fitting in like that. But that's how long it takes. Now, a woman who's say 40, or late 30s maybe, and her child came here at, I think they just finished high school in Ukraine, and they've been here maybe not quite 10 years, I think. The girl is completely Ukrainian, attitudes, that part of the world, no social trust, is very devious, is constantly, you can see that the cogs in the mind turning, constantly looking at ways to deceive and cheat others and to outwit them. And then, she's still got that attitude from the former communist countries and indeed that part of the world generally. But over time, the Ukrainians do, and again, two generations, that they're close to fully integrating. 3 generations, absolutely seamless. You couldn't tell the difference from anyone else. Whereas, the Arabs, the Chinese, and the Indians either never integrate or take much longer, integrate on a much lesser scale. If I look at the Russians and Ukrainians and people from that wider area, even Belarusian and so on, they tend to integrate pretty quickly, relative to others, that is. So it's just something to think, a few things to think about there, and to consider that the Ukrainians, if England took 250,000, for example, so 250,000 Ukrainians, assuming they even wanted to stay in the UK, but expelled 250,000 Africans, then the wider social and national benefit to the nation would be enhanced substantially, in my opinion. If something like, not that I'm expecting to happen, by the way, but they're probably a better bet in the overall scheme of things than people who come from, illiterate peasant basket case African countries or anywhere else that's in that condition. So in that sense, on a relative basis, having said all that, though, should Ukrainians be greeted into or brought into and waved into the Western countries? No, I don't think so. I think special facilities, maybe UN control facilities on the periphery of Western Ukraine and Belarus, place like that, under UN control, should be instituted and put there to look after people and feed them and that sort of thing until the military operations have ended and things have settled down and they can go back to their homes. If the UN want to do something useful, which is rare these days, they could help people rebuild their homes, supply building materials and things like that. Should these people be helped? Of course they should. Of course they should. Should the rich countries play a role in helping them? Absolutely. But the United Nations will spend billions on, lesbian studies and that sort of thing. But are they going to lift a hand to help people in rural Ukraine? Maybe their house got bombed, or in, their house is in a serious state of disrepair as a result of some sort of military operations. Shouldn't they be helped as a priority? I mean, forget lesbian painting classes. Why not help people like that? You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.